Thank you, Lawrence, and good evening to all of you. It's really a pleasure to be here this evening, and for me, this is a great opportunity to thank our teachers and for all of you to support this worthy cause, because our teachers do their great jobs year in and year out without thank yous, and I want to have this opportunity to say thank you to them. Dawn's talent as a writer is a tremendous asset in the classroom, and she changes the lives of students by instilling in them a love of English and writing. Dawn, thank you for everything, and it's now my pleasure to bring Dawn to the microphone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The distance between southern Appalachia, where I grew up, and this Mandarin hotel ballroom is really not such a great distance, nor is the distance between an afternoon in 1981 reading a high school essay to my parents and, a few weeks ago, receiving a call from Lawrence Schiller telling me I had won the first Norman Mailer Teacher Writing Award. The distance is not so great because there is a bridge created by words that can cross even the widest divides. In creating this award for teachers, the Norman Mailer Center has allowed teachers passage on that bridge. And in giving this first award to a public school teacher, the Norman Mailer Center is questioning those who would be keepers of the gate, questioning the status quo in our governing bodies that seems bent on impoverishing public schools and preventing their movement from the less advantaged land on one side of that bridge to the proverbial land of opportunity that is always just within those students' sight. For many of us in this room, there lives in our memories someone whose words encouraged, cajoled, irritated, and chided us into fulfilling our potential. For me, it is the words of a teacher at a tiny mountain elementary school telling me he had sent a story I had written to a state competition. It is the words of another teacher at Swain County High School telling me I might have talent if I worked at it. And it is my own words heard in the voice of yet another high school teacher reading a critical essay I had written to the class. These teachers' words live in me as I try to say something fresh and true to my own classes of 17 and 18-year-olds at the same Appalachian high school that I attended. These words live in me when I sit at my desk and write. These words reside in me, just as I hope the words I write, the words I speak, will take up residence in those who hear and read them and provide for them a means of bridging economic and societal gaps. From the rural child living in a single wide trailer, like I was, to the urban child living in an apartment in the projects, from the mountain student I teach who has applied to Vanderbilt and Tulane, to the one who hopes only for community college and who did without heat or electricity for all of last winter without complaint. What my students want is what you all want, what we all want. That someone will attend to our words, that someone will show us how to use those words to establish our dignity and uphold the democracy that may move us all to a better place. And that is what I think is so wonderful about this award that I received tonight. It does not offer the sentimental version of me, the teacher, as unsung hero, perpetuating the damaging stereotype of teachers as martyrs. Nor does it thank me for 10,000 graded essays, nor for teaching thousands of stories, nor for caring about one after another of the students who enter and exit my classroom, but never my memory. Instead, This award thanks me for saying what I would have said anyway because it has to be said. This award thanks me for the insistent words that will not be quiet or still because they cannot be quiet or still. For the words that teach, but even more for the words that tell a story, that keep me awake nights, that demand they be allowed to go beyond the walls of school. God gives teachers who write two voices, the one voice with which we shape the words that allow us to teach, and the other with which we shape the stories that we must write. And among the impassioned and the dedicated, these words and the voices that give them life become a compulsion, because we know they are a passport for anyone who learns to use them. This award this evening from the Norman Mailer Center is my assurance that someone out there is listening to what I am compelled to say. Someone out there believes a teacher, a public school teacher, has words that are worthy of recognition. And as each year in the future allows yet another teacher to stand in this place and feel this moment of grace and gratitude, and as the words grow in number and the voices grow in volume, perhaps those whose legislation so deeply affects us all will notice and believe that those of us who spend most of our lives in a classroom do indeed have words that are worthy of attention, words that can connect people on one side of a divide to the people on the other. And so I thank you. Thank you for allowing our world to expand beyond our schools, and for giving our words, for giving my words, an audience that listens, that allows those of us on the far side of the gap to do more than just see the land that is promised, but to actually touch it. Thank you.
Elie Wiesel is still on the watch for us to help us keep our memories alive despite the passage of time, for teaching us the lessons that transcend time about the perils of indifference.
Thank you, Mort. Thank you, leaders of this center, and thank all of you who are here tonight. With me, I have, of course, my wife, and Lynn, who is my son's wife, and good friends. Now, I was given 3 minutes, and I remember Mort. Actually, 15 years ago, you and I were together with President Clinton in Air Force One, going to Israel to the funeral of Yitzhak Rabin. This is an anniversary. 15 years ago, Rabin was killed, murdered, and terrible irony by a young religious student. And the world has changed. Well, has the world improved since? We are trying. If I remember Norman Mailer, we met twice. And each time, of course, we spoke about what is happening to the world and how we could change it. Can one? All we have is words, nothing else. Can words change destiny? God used them to create the world. The enemy of humankind uses them to destroy the world. And here we are with our words, trying our best, and do what we can to save a life here, a community there. And the main thing is to sensitize people to the threats and also the hopes that confront all of us. I, in conclusion, will tell you a story. I love stories. And the story actually would apply to Norman Mailer as well as to myself. Once upon a time, there was a young man, a young student actually, and he decided he must change the world. But how can you change the world? The world is big. Maybe a continent, also too big. Maybe a country, horrible. He chose actually a village. the worst village in the land. He went there. And he, day after day, walked streets from one marketplace to another with posters. Men and women, remember what is to do. Men and women, don't be indifferent. Men and women, don't be cruel. And so forth. Day after day he went. And nothing changed. One day he was stopped by a young boy. And the boy said to him, "Poor stranger, you shout and you shout and you shout and you shout. Don't you see? They don't change and never will." He said, "I know." "You know?" "Yes, I know. They will never change." "Then why do you shout?" He said, "I'll tell you. In the beginning I thought if I were to shout loud enough, I will change them. Now I know I will not. But if I shout louder and louder, it is because I don't want them to change me." Thank you.
In 1998, India successfully achieved their own nuclear bomb, and in 1999, Arundhati Roy wrote her meditation on that event. I'm going to read the first two paragraphs from what Arundhati had to say. She called her piece "The End of Imagination," and she dedicated it for marmots and voles and everything else on Earth that is threatened and terrorized by the human race. May 1998. It'll go down in history books, provided, of course, we have history books to go down in, provided, of course, we have a future. There's nothing new or original left to be said about nuclear weapons. There can be nothing more humiliating for a writer of fiction to have to do than restate a case that has, over the years, already been made by other people in other parts of the world and made passionately, eloquently, and knowledgeably. I am prepared to grovel, to humiliate myself abjectly, because in the circumstances, silence would be indefensible. So those of you who are willing, let's pick our parts, put on these discarded costumes, and speak our secondhand lines in this sad secondhand play. But let's not forget that the stakes we're playing for are huge. Our fatigue and our shame could mean the end of us, the end of our children and our children's children, of everything we love. We have to reach within ourselves and find the strength to think, to fight. Arundhati, your recent books are labeled as essays, but they are really reportage from the front lines of human experience. Your reportage is largely derived from events occurring in India and Kashmir, but your work speaks to struggles, similar and very different, occurring all over the planet. Arundhati, it never ceases to amaze me how the fierce and true clarity of your reportage provides such rich terrain for your unstoppable and boundless belief in the courage, tenacity, and potential of the human heart and the human spirit. Arundhati, I love every word you've ever written. Please join me on stage so you can receive your award.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all of you for being here. Winning the Norman Mailer Prize is a step up from the first prize that I ever won in my life, which was for a screenplay, and the prize was called Best Film in Languages Other Than Those Specified in Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution, which was English. It's wonderful to be honored for writing, which in my country is considered seditious and anti-national and generally treacherous. So thank you for that. Um, Unlike the United States, which has been at war with several countries for several decades, even as we speak, your drones are killing people, children in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, and in Iraq. Thousands of American troops are moving into Africa to secure resources so that the American way of life might continue. But in India, the Indian government makes war against itself, against its own people. So ever since India became an independent country, it has deployed its army in Kashmir, in Nagaland, in Manipur. Kashmir, maybe many of you don't know this, but it's the most densely occupied military zone in the world. When America went to war against Iraq, it deployed 165,000 troops. But there are 700,000 Indian soldiers all year round in Kashmir. 70,000 people have been killed in that conflict over the last few years. But the Indian government has many ways of waging war. Since the early 90s, when it joined the free market and became what it thinks of itself as a superpower, 250,000 farmers have committed suicide because they're in debt. Nothing like that has happened in human history before. Today, India has more poor people than all the poorest countries of Africa put together. But you wouldn't know it if you read the papers, would you? 80% of Indian people live on less than 20 rupees a day, which is less than $0.50 a day. So that's the country that I live in and write about. There are huge conflicts all the time, every day. And now the Indian government is planning to deploy its army in central India to wage war against 100 million Adivasi people. Adivasi people are indigenous tribal people. Why is this war going to be waged? Already there are 200,000 paramilitary troops in there, but now the army is going to be deployed. The brigades are already moving in because, as usual, indigenous people live on very land full of mineral wealth. There's more than $4 trillion worth of bauxite, of iron ore. As you know, bauxite is used to make aluminum, which is used for the manufacture of weapons. So this very poor country is buying billions of dollars of weapons from America and from Israel to deploy against the poorest people in the world. So when I came to New York, I came yesterday, day before yesterday, I went down to Wall Street because I wanted to see what it was. After all this mining and all these wars that are being fought in India is in order that we become like you, because you are the role model for the world. So I went to Wall Street to see what was this trouble in paradise, what was going on here. And I tried to make the connection between what is happening in Wall Street and all those conflicts that I have been a part of and I write about. And of course, there isn't enough time to say everything, but you don't have to win the Norman Mailer Prize to be able to say that what connects these conflicts is exclusion. In India, 100 people, the richest 100 people, own assets equal to 25% of its GDP. In America, 400 people own the wealth of half of the rest of America. So it doesn't need the Norman Mailer Prize to say that we have a problem on our hands, a problem that needs to be addressed systemically. And I can just say that no individual, no corporation can be allowed to have such unfettered wealth, such unfettered power. There has to be a cap on what corporations can have, what people can have. And so we have to put a cap on it. We have to put a lid on it. As a capist and a lidite, I thank you for the Norman Mailer Prize.
So his writing is really some of the century's best. And what sets it apart is that his stories are true. In 1966, Esquire published Frank Sinatra Has a Cold, in which Gay pens what is arguably the most remarkable celebrity profile really ever composed, well, without ever once interviewing his subject. The piece rewrote the book on writing books, to say nothing of the magazine, and pushed the boundaries of what was possible in nonfiction. I give it to so many young journalists when they come and ask me the kind of piece they want to do. The heroes of nonfiction are too often underappreciated, and Gay has said that nonfiction writers are treated like second-class citizens, the Ellis Island of literature. Looking back at his career, I think it's fair to say that he has effectively solved the problem, that he's earned full citizenship for himself and all the many journalists and authors who practice his craft. His body of work is thoroughly researched, so carefully executed, so brilliantly conceived, that we can justifiably say that it helped elevate nonfiction to its deserved place in the literary firmament. And for that achievement, we honor him tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Gay Talese.
I'm very grateful for the introduction and for the presence of so many of you tonight here. I'm also very proud and very pleased to receive an award for journalism. When I first came to New York at the age of 21 and got a job as the lower level reporter in the New York Times city room, I one day looked around the room and saw 400 or 500 reporters and copy editors and other persons in the business of telling the truth each day. And I thought, how lucky I am to be in this room, the vast city room of the New York Times. And I thought, I'm looking around this room, all these people behind these typewriters and these desks and these pencils that are going over the copy that's going to be in tomorrow's New York Times. And I thought, there are in this room, all these people I saw in this vast room, per square yard, I thought, there are fewer liars than any room comparable in New York City at this time. And I thought, I'm in the right profession. We have fewer liars than in the clergy, than in business, than in academia, and certainly sports, and certainly maybe University of Penn State, who knows. But we have in this profession a dedication to getting it right. And this is something that's noble, to get it, or to try to get it right. And if you don't get it right, or if you lie, and there are journalists who lie, it is the journalists who will cite them for their malfeasance, who will call correction to their presence, and who will force them out of the profession. This happened in my own newspaper, the New York Times, when we had such a person as Jason Blair some years ago. And it wasn't the Supreme Court, it wasn't any higher level of American morality that booted this managing editor and the executive editor out of the paper. It was the reporters who would not tolerate lying. And I thought then, and I think now, I'm in a wonderful way of work. And to receive this award that espouses journalism at the highest level, is to join Tina's husband, for example, Sir Howard Evans, many people in this room who represent journalism at its very best, and not the least, Norman Mailer, who was, among other things, a fine, great journalist, a great artist. And I'm so happy to be associated with this prize as a journalist. And I thank you for representing me tonight in my moment of joy. Thank you.
Okay, time for the sax player and the guitar picker. The confluence of these two people, I think it may have inspired a new genre. For me, last night I went to my shelf and I picked up My Life by Bill Clinton and Life by Keith Richards. And I discovered, as good as they are on their own, when you read them simultaneously, it's a whole new adventure. So let me give you a little sample. One of the things I liked best about living in the White House was the fresh flowers that filled the residence and office spaces. And while I'd never recommend it to anyone, heroin does have its uses. Just getting warmed up here. I was very impressed with Madeleine Albright, her intellectual toughness and character, but then she went back to New York and took up with Jimi Hendrix, who may have broken her heart as she broke mine. I had less than a week to get ready to meet Boris Yeltsin in Helsinki, and somewhere halfway to Perth, two girls burst out of the John semi-naked. We were laughing, and then we heard this collective gasp. We figured we were on our own plane and forgotten about the other passengers. Gingrich had proved to be a better politician than I was, but it was the beginning of the 80s when Mick started to become unbearable. If we didn't love these men more, when you put them together, the power is doubled. But there was one line in Keith's book that I think could probably appear in the president's book as well. I can improvise when I'm unconscious. But I mean that in the best way, because this next presenter can articulate policy positions in his sleep, if he sleeps. Ever since leaving office, it seems like he's more active than ever. Quadruple bypass be damned. He is now a philanthropist, a global activist, the father of the bride, a vegan, and also an author. Once again, his new book just out, Back to Work, getting great reviews. And because it has such really important suggestions for our country these days, I suggest just listening maybe to Sticky Fingers in the background and concentrating on the words on the page. The 42nd President of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you. Well, you know, all my life I've been a frustrated musician. I suppose having my book grafted on to Keith's is the best I can do. Made me sound more interesting and him sound more sane. First, I'm honored to be here tonight. And I'd like to thank all the people who are responsible for giving the Mailer Prize in Biography, for honoring my friend, and who knew, not only one of the greatest guitarists in the history of American music, but a heck of a good writer, who told us the truth about the Rolling Stones and gave us some insight about why they became the longest lasting rock and roll band in history, as well as, by their own admission, the greatest. And who told us about an era and also told his own story. Norman Mailer, I believe, would have been jealous of me tonight. He would like to have spent the evening with Keith Richards. I was very honored when I was asked to do this for another reason, My 92-year-old mother-in-law, the last surviving member of that generation of our family, died a few days ago. She was very important to Hillary and to our daughter and to me. But we weren't nearly as important to her as Keith Richards. Do you have any idea what it's like to have a 92-year-old groupie living in your house? A woman who lived and breathed for the Rolling Stones. 5 years ago at the Beacon Theater, and Martin Scorsese was doing his film on the Stones, they were kind enough to give me some of the seats on one night so we could raise some money for my foundation. My mother-in-law shows up early, stands in line, patiently waits to faint in front of Richards. A few months ago, we go down to the Turks in Caicos to stay with our friend Donna Karen. Keith lives a couple of blocks away. Says, sure, he'll come by and say hi to Dorothy. She gets a whole different set of clothes on. We're in the Caribbean, for God's sakes. And he comes and spends an hour with her, kisses her hello, kisses her goodbye. What am I, chopped liver? It was beautiful. He gives her an autographed copy of the book. She had already bought one on her own. She had already read it. I said, Dorothy, what'd you think? She said, I always did like those bad boys. Why am I saying all this? Because there's a reason Life is a great book. I don't want to quote from Life. I want to quote from what I thought was a brilliant review that about a year ago Michiko Katatutani wrote in the New York Times. Just one sentence. Keith Richards is not only the heart and soul of the world's greatest rock and roll band, he's also the very avatar of rebellion. The desperado, the buccaneer, the sole survivor and main offender, the torn and frayed outlaw, and the coolest dude on the planet. Named both number one on the rock stars most likely to die list, and the one life form besides the cockroach capable of surviving nuclear war. If you haven't read this book, I'm telling you, you need to read it. And so I want to just mention one thing. I was in politics for a long time, and half the people I met thought I was, by definition, a phony if I did that. This is a brilliant statement which will give you some clue of how breathtakingly honest and clear this entire book is. I can't untie the threads of how much I played up to the part that was written for me. I mean, the skull ring and the broken tooth and the cold. Is it half and half? I think in a way your persona, your image, as it used to be known, is like a ball and chain. People think I'm still a goddamn junkie. It's 30 years since I gave up the dope. Image is like a long shadow. Even when the sun goes down, you can see it. He's a good guy. He's a brilliant musician. He has had an unlikely life. If you read 10 pages of this book, you won't be able to put it down. And you will understand once again, most people who really do something special did it because of what they had inside. And turns out it wasn't an accident after all. Thank you for honoring my great friend, Keith. Come on up.
Thank you, Bill. You know, I mean, what can you say after this? You know, I mean, if I was an American, I'd think of running. But no, this is awesome because I mean, hey, usually when I'm working a crowd, I have a guitar around my neck, you know, so I have this prop, you know, to play with, and no, this is the most amazing thing to happen to me. This is one for the books. You know? If you get my drift, you hacks, you know. Hey, I write one book and I get the award, you know what I mean? Shit happens, you know. I'm a bit of a loss for words on this. But I realized about writing that, hell, I've been writing like since I was 16, 17, 18, but they were called songs. And you had to bring them in 2 minutes and 30 seconds, and otherwise, out of here, you know. And so, I mean, in a way, I've been writing for a long time, so I don't feel too much of an intrusion as I thought I would feel, you know. I mean, with Gay Talese, and I mean, so you get been, you know, the scribbling away and stuff, you know, and brilliantly, and then you've heard some words from some incredible people tonight, you know. It's about some serious stuff, you know. You know, the only serious stuff I'm interested in, I've given up. But I don't want to be too flippant about this because people have been here tonight who've said some great things that mean things to like the human race, you know, and I ain't in a race, you know. But you know, I don't know how to thank you all. I'm so amazed by this. I mean, I feel like a thief in the night, you know.